It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millzy, back with the hometown commander. We're back for another episode of Millzy Brews, the show where I strive to outbrew your favorite Magic channel by bringing you my 1.0 deck list for the commander in question. No testing, just the first deck I could come up with, the first 100 cards that I liked. And the goal of this show is to either take this deck and get your opinions on it, or have you take it and test it, however you may fit, or talk about what we can change for the deck in the comments. Again, the goal of this show is not to build a perfect deck. There's going to be things that need to be changed. There's going to be cards that need to be changed. But this is my first shot at deck list. And I hope that you appreciate that. You appreciate the conversation we get to have surrounding new commanders. And today's episode is on probably a commander that a lot of people were either looking at building or putting into their favorite deck, and that's Elesh Norn, Mommy of Machines. 4 and a white for a 4/7 with vigilance. If a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability, if a permanent you control triggered, that ability triggers an additional time, and permanents entering the battlefield don't cause abilities or permanents your opponents control to trigger. So you get to double up our ETB abilities like Panharmonicon, and we get to shut down our opponent's ETB abilities. To be honest, this is a pretty important effect. You know, a lot of green landfall decks and things like that rely on lands coming in and triggering abilities. This could shut down that. It also can shut down a lot of effects that deal damage or take care of certain effects. You know, some combo decks rely on creatures coming in with Warstorm Surge or abilities like that to deal damage. Some decks rely on enchantment removal and things like that to take out permanents and things like that. So there's a lot of things that I think that Elesh Norn can stop our opponents from doing. But I think the benefit we get is that Elesh Norn does a lot of things to double the things we already want to do. I haven't tried to go combo crazy, although to be 100% honest, it's going to be really easy to go infinite blinking creatures. So what my hope is that we can find some outs to blinking our creatures into oblivion. Now, by going infinite, I don't mean that, what we could do, we literally cannot stop ourselves. In most of the combinations of creatures that are going to allow us to blink creatures as many times as we want to, there will always be an out. There'll always be an ability to just blink something else and then stop the chain if that's what we want to do. So it won't be creating an infinite game state that we cannot stop. But a lot of the goal of the deck, when we get down into the other cards, is trying to build ways to win the game from either a ton of extra life or using some of our creatures that come in and make tokens to swarm the board that way. So I think there's plenty of ways you can take this card, this deck. I think I've gone two mainly. Striving for either infinite loops with things like Sun Titan, being able to bring back things from the graveyard, and we do have a couple ways to sacrifice the creatures to things to create infinite situations where we're, using things like Altar of Dimension and mill our opponents out. We have things like Altar of the Brood, which whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under control, each opponent puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. What this is going to do is eventually mill our opponents out as we do our loop of exiling things and bringing them back in, and then all we'd have to simply do is end our turn, and all of our opponents would lose to not having any decks left. I think there's plenty of routes for us to go, so let's just talk about it really quick. The lands, we're not playing much. We're playing mostly plains. Just a couple things, Reliquary Cower, in case any of our things that come in draw cards. We don't want to just be pitching cards. Nick those. Hopefully we have a big enough board that we can tap this for good mana. Emiria. At the beginning of our upkeep, if we control 7 or more planes, we can return a creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield. It's going to be kind of hard to do because, we don't really have much ramp as far as ramp goes. But I think if we can get to the point where Emiria can bring us stuff back, it's going to be great. Aganjo for a little bit of combat protection. Mycosynth Gardens is in here mainly just to copy some of the artifacts we care about. Urza Saga is going to help us find similar ones. And then I said Tower just to make sure we don't overdraw. As far as our enchantments, Johnny's Welcome is going to help us gain that life every time something comes in. This could technically keep our life total as big as we want it to be. This is something we compare with something like Aetherflux Reservoir to just laser beam all our opponents out that way. That's the way we can do it. Authority of the Console is going to make all of our opponents' creatures comes in tap. This is just going to try to help. And then we'll get 2 life as far as Elesh Norn's out for every creature that comes in. But the goal here is the goal with Authority of the Console is try to shut our opponents down just a teeny bit, slow them down, help keep us ahead. We're playing a couple things like Banishing Light. A couple of these. This is when it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent opponent controls or leaves the battlefield. Well, this is going to go off twice. So we'll get this ability twice. We'll be able to do that twice off the same activation. That's the same with something like Oblivion Ring and Ossification. Same thing with Grasp of Fate, although Grasp of Fate is going to do one for each opponent. So that's pretty cool too. And so instead of 3 opponents, if we have, or instead of 3 permanents, if we have 3 opponents, it would be 6 with Elesh Norn out. So these kind of cards I think are going to come in handy. Blessed Sanctuary, one of our ways to go off here. Prevent all non-combat damage to be dealt to you and creatures you control. This is going to help us try to avoid dying outside of combat. And then whenever non-token creature enters the battlefield, we get a 2/2 unicorn. This is going to loop with some of those blink loops, and this is going to allow us to just make a bunch of tokens. Cathar's Crusade can make them really big. Spelling Tide is just going to help us get a little bit up on mana, and then Teleportation is going to be Teleportation Circles, a way for us to blink some of those creatures that when they come in, they blink other creatures. So the big way we're going to make this loop happen, you need a creature to exile itself and come back in. That's what we refer to as blinking. And when that creature comes back in, we need that creature to blink the first creature or any other creature that when it comes back in would blink another creature. And you would basically just start this loop that we could control to blink creatures out, have them come back in, and then try to take advantage of these either ETB effects that are already on the creatures or any of these abilities on these other permanents that we're kind of putting through together. So that's going to be the main loop. And the best part is we can do this at instant speed, because if we can do it at instant speed, what we can actually do is amass a giant army of tokens on our opponent's end step, untap and win on our turn. There's plenty of ways we can do this, but I think that's the main line for it. So we talked about the Aetherflux, we talked about Dimension Brood. They're doing a very similar result. Now the Ultimate Dimension, we have to sacrifice a creature to mill people for that many cards. So I think the plan there is you sacrifice a creature with mana value 3 or less, you blink a Sun Titan, it comes back in, and you get that creature back, and then you sacrifice it again to the Dementia. Probably should be able to do that, hopefully in response to triggers, or find a way to stack the triggers so that they work the way you want them to. Again, blink. Like if you blink a Sun Titan and another creature, and they come back in, you can order the ways that their triggers go off. You could bring that back, sacrifice it before the other one resolves, blink them again. So there's different ways we can set up. It's a lot of mess, but I think once you do it the first time, you'll understand kind of how that combo line works and what you can do to do that. Conjurer's Closet, another way to blink a creature on our end step. We're playing Arcane Signet, Soul Ring, Skyclave Relic, because if we kick it, we can actually get 4 tap copies instead of 2. Pearl Medallion. And these guys are going to help us with our mana. Pearl Medallion and a Catcher's Monument both make white spells. We cost 1 less. The Medallion's just all white spells. A Catcher's Monument's just creatures, but still very helpful. Grease and the Boots to help protect Elesh Norn or the other creatures that we need them to protect. Panharmonicon's going to act as another copy of Elesh Norn, which can help us out in a lot of ways. Now, this one doesn't shut down our opponents, but it still doubles ours, which is the thing we're trying to do anyway. Sword of Hearth and Home, whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, we exile up to 1 target creature we own, search a library for a basic land, and then put both back onto the battlefield. This not only ramps us, but it also blinks something that could give us more life, more creatures, what have you. And then Sword of the Animus, same thing. Whenever it attacks, we get a land. So this is going to help us kind of get up on lands as well. I thought about running Nyx Lotus and things like that to kind of go on this Nykthos train, but I just didn't quite see the play line. Looking at it, I was kind of worried that we may get caught out too many times and not have enough permanents to really rely on those. So that might be something as we gather more ourselves into testing, we might find works a little bit better. Sorceries, Farewell, Savine's Reclamation can get something back, and we can also flash it back. Idyllic Tutor and White Sun's Twilight. White Sun's Twilight is just a little bit of a board wipe, but it also can give us the option to... It can give us the option to potentially toxic someone out as well, but I think more often than not, White Sun's Twilight's just a board wipe with upside. As far as instants, Cloud Shift and Ephemerate do a very similar thing. They take 1 creature, exile it, return it back. Ephemerate rebounds itself, meaning with the next turn we cast it again, whereas Cloud Shift does not. But these are just single target bounce and exile and bring back blinking. Eerie Interlude and Lae'zel's Acrobatics are hopefully all creatures. Lae'zel's Acrobatics is all non-token creatures, and Eerie Interlude is any number of target creatures. They blink and they come back. Eerie Interlude's at the beginning of the next end step, and so is Acrobatics. But the cool part about these two is they can be used defensively. You basically blink them out. The board wipe, whatever you're trying to perfect from, goes off, and then they come back in. Now, with Eerie Interlude, you can exile your tokens, but remember, as soon as tokens leave the battlefield, they disappear. So Eerie's Interlude, you would lose those tokens no matter what. Whereas Lyzal's Acrobatics, you don't get the privilege of exiling the tokens with them. The only reason you might want to exile the tokens with your interlude, you may be sitting there thinking, but Millzy, you just said I can't get them back. Why would I still try to blink them? Well, if your opponent plays something like a Fumigate where they get a bonus for every creature they destroy, or they get some death effect by creatures dying, I would much rather nuke my tokens by exiling them where they're not going to go off for a Blood Artist or something like that, rather than leave them on the battlefield to get destroyed in one of those effects. E-Tutor is just a pretty great card in this deck. It can get any of our artifacts or any of our enchantments. Like if we see an infinite loop for the loop starting, we can go get something like Alter the Brood. We could go get a bunch of other things if need be. So I like E-Tutor here. Helps out done. Clever Concealment and Flawless Maneuver are more not necessarily blink options. They're more just protection options. Clever Concealment can phase all of our permanents out to avoid Farewell and things like that. Farewell is one of the most dangerous board wipes in Commander at the moment because it just straight exiles a lot of things that people want to protect. And I think Clever Concealment is a very good answer to something like Farewell as the game gets... As board wipes swing more and more towards Farewell, where they're exiling instead of just straight up destroying, I think Clever Concealment becomes more important, but we're still playing the Flawless Maneuver just in case. We're still playing that straight up protection as well as we're adding Teferi's protection here as well. So we want to add a little bit of protection. We're not just trying to dump everything on the board and win. We also need to protect ourselves from that. As far as removal, Generous Gift, Path, and Swords. I think there's more removal we could add. I had looked at Fateful Absence and things like that, but... we have some enchantments that remove as well, so we're not just relying on these. I think we got a couple other pieces here, so I'll do a couple board wipes. So I think we've got a decent amount of removal. I don't think removal is going to be the issue. I think the real problem with this deck that most people who want to build Elesh Norn have to figure out is what is your end game and how do you get to that end game? At the end of the day, that's what every deck wants to do, right? You figure out what's your win con, what's your win strategy, and how do you get there efficiently. And so my hope is, with this being a white deck and the mana curve being kind of down on the low end with a lot of these creatures, hopefully it's just ramping, going naturally and getting ourselves built up into the curve. But other people may choose to take the deck list different ways. My goal is to get into one of these situations where I can basically control how many times I want to blink a creature, and there's plenty of combos of these creatures that do that. But this creature set is a mix of the ones that enable it, things like Soul's Attendant or Soul Warden, who gain me life every time a creature comes in. This could gain me near infinite life and keep me alive for a long time, with the exception of commander damage, right? Commander damage, we can't gain life for that. There are things like Inspiring Overseer and Priest of the Ancient Lore that draw us cards when they come in that can keep us drawing and getting us into the cards that we need. You have things like Blade Splicer that make tokens when they come in. So what that's going to do is allow us to go wide, like Rigo Caracal and Blade Spicer, that make tokens when they come in. And what that's going to do is keep our board wide and keep us safe. Solemn Simulacrum can draw us cards. Solitude can exile creatures. It's kind of like Sword of Plowshares, but on a kind of Swords of Plowshares, but on a creature. We have Mondrak to double up any of the tokens that we can make. Evangel of Heliod and Reverent Hoplite are the ones that make tokens for the number of our devotion we have to white. So hopefully we can just make a ton of tokens, and there's plenty of ways to do that. We don't have any of the red or black effects to like hit our opponents on how many that are coming in or deal damage to them when they die. So that is one risk. But I think the good part is if we can make a ton of tokens and we have ways of gaining life with Daxos or Authority of the Consuls or some other ways that we have to gain life, all we need is go find that Aether Flux or go find that Alter Dementia where we can sack all those tokens to, right? Because if we're bouncing... Let's say we're bouncing Reverent Hoplite every time we're coming in and making 4 tokens over and over and over again. Well, we just need to sacrifice those to the Altar of Dementia and mill all our opponents out. So you can see there's a few various ways we can kind of take our game plan to reach our goal. But a lot of these creatures are going to pair together and do really good things for us. For the sake of time, I'm not going to run through all of the individual individual combinations, because there are actually more of them than you'd expect. I mean, Feldar Guardians, one of the more important ones. Karmic Guides, one of the more important ones. Eldrazi Displacers, one of the more important ones. Charming Prince is a pretty important one. Restoration Angels, a pretty important one. You know, these are the ones that you're going to see all of these combos start with. But the truth is, the combinations of things that you need would surprise you for most of these decks with just one blinker, what you can get value-wise every time it comes in. And then once you get a Conjurer's Closet or a Teleportation Circle, you know, making tokens and drawing cards and gaining life, you know, this stacks up over time more than you expect. Remember, if Elesh Norn's out, you're doubling all of these effects. You're doubling the card draw. You're doubling the life gain. You know, something like Solitude, you're doubling the things that you're exiling. So it's going to stack up more and more and more and more and more over time. So I think a lot of the appeal for this deck is going to be, do you like putting that kind of jigsaw puzzle together to make it work and end the game out? And then we're playing just one Planeswalker. We're playing the Eternal Wanderer. Mainly just because it's +1 is a blink, so I think that's pretty important. It's 0 is a 2/2 that has double strike, and then it's -4 sacrifices all creatures they control not chosen this way. So everybody picks a creature, and then everybody sacrifices the rep. Now, I want to make this point clear about the Eternal Wanderer, because I think people are going to get caught out by this, whether it's on Arena or Commander. The Eternal Wanderer says not more than one creature can attack the Eternal Wanderer each combat. Friends, that is on attack declaration. If you're playing something like Adeline, you're playing something like Ilharg the Raised Boar, something that puts something in tapped and attacking, you can actually declare that thing tapped and attacking at Eternal Wanderer, because effects like this only check declaration, Ghostly Prison, Crawl Space. These are abilities that only check on attack declaration and not after. So you may think you can play your Eternal Wanderer into a Kalia and be completely safe, but you are not going to be. It's not the way that the rules work, and you have to be careful. Now, at the end of the day, Planeswalkers are the hardest thing to make stick in Commander, because everybody goes after them, especially the ones that have great abilities. My hope is that the Eternal Wanderer is just another, in all reality, to me, it's another copy of Conjurer's Closet or another copy of Teleportation Circle that we can eventually ultimate to hurt some people, if, you know, use the -4 to hurt some people if need be. It can be a board wipe if that's what we need it to be, but it also can be something that just helps us blink our own creatures. So, just temper your expectations with the Eternal Wanderer. It's not as free and clear as you think it is. It is still possible to hurt it. In those token decks, they get tokens tapped and attacking. You are not completely safe. There are rules around this that don't completely protect the Wanderer, but hopefully we can have a board wide enough that we won't have to worry about that situation. Hopefully we can block out, we can take care of the things that we need to take care of. But I think there's going to be people who play things like the Eternal Wanderer, and we're going to run into those situations with Myriad or any of those token creations that come in tapped and attacking, and people aren't going to understand functionally how that ability works. And so I really want to make sure that we are all aware that that's how that works. Again, I don't think it's going to hurt us too much, but those are the kind of rulings you have to keep in the back of your head when you're playing against some of these cards. I have decks that do that, and I'm looking forward to getting rid of an Eternal Wanderer, and that someone may not realize that it works that way, because they're not sure those small rules interactions that we want to make sure that we're paying attention to, especially in decks like some of the decks that I play where we're trying to end the game via combat. You need to know those abilities. You need to know those rulings, because if I'm trying to end the game with 120 points of combat damage, I need to know how to do that, right? If that's the game plan I'm choosing to go with, you got to know how to do that. You got to be aware. You got to make a plan to do that. Now, thankfully, with most combat decks, you really only need to take 60 or 80 most of the time, right? Because most people are going to take damage from other things. But my point is, if you're going to play a deck like this, if you're going to play a deck like Elesh Norn, know the rulings, know how blinking things work, know how timing works, practice with friends, go to a shop and say, hey, this is a new deck I'm playing for the first time. I think I understand how some of these rules go, but just give me some time as we all figure this out together. I would think that most well-established players, if you sat down with a new deck and said, hey, I'm not 100% sure on how some of these rules interactions go, but I'm trying them out, I would argue that most of them probably want to help. They're intrigued to see what you brought. How does it work? And they'll probably want to help. If not, find people at your shop or in a local group that want to help you, that don't want to play these games and have these fun conversations and things like that. And hope that. I don't think this deck is overpowered. I really don't think this deck is very strong. Like, I don't think this isn't a lull. It's a 9 or it's an 8 or whatever. Like, this isn't the strongest deck I've ever seen. I think it's a good deck if you set this combo of bouncing up. It's gonna surprise some people, but I think you got to get there right, and most of it relies on setting the right cards. The cool part about this deck is Elesh Norn is almost not needed for a lot of these combos. I just think that Elesh Norn speeds up the combos. So that's the one thing I like about it in this deck, is it kind of speeds up the combos. It makes them happen even faster. You might be able to get it to go off a turn or two sooner because of Elesh Norn kind of doubling these things, rather than other decks where your commander is the literal engine that makes your deck run, and now you're worried about not being able to go off. So what do you guys think of Elesh Norn? Let me know down in the comments. If you like content like this. Subscribe if you want to see me out brew your favorite Magic channel. I am excited to keep Millzy brews coming. This is something I really love, and I want to brew for you guys. I want to brew for myself. I enjoy brewing. This is something I enjoy doing, and I try to play these decks whenever I can. Sometimes there's these decks that I want to play, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I like just brewing ideas and being willing to sit down and make something work, even if I have no intention of ever actually playing it. But thank you guys so much, and I will catch you next.